Sick wife has high needs. Last night around 11:30 p.m., after I had already been asleep for about 2 hours with our two-old daughter, I work in the morning, she doesn't, my wife called me repeatedly on my cell until I picked up. She said it was an emergency and she needed me to come downstairs. When I got down there, she was lying in bed and said she felt really bad, like she was going to throw up and that she couldn't fall asleep. I asked what the emergency was and she said, "I just told you." I was like, "Babe, feeling like you're going to throw up and not being able to fall asleep are not emergencies. Do you need to go to urgent care?" She said she didn't know, but that she felt like she had a fever, so maybe. I went and got the very expensive, accurate thermometer I got us, and it said 98.8 degrees Fahrenheit. I said, "Okay, you don't have a fever," and she then proceeded to argue with me about how that actually is a fever for her since her normal temp is around 97 degrees Fahrenheit. I told her she should take some Tylenol, and she explained that she didn't think she should because she might throw it up. I suggested she could take a muscle relaxer to help relax her body to fall asleep, and she said she was worried she'd throw it up or that it would make her feel bad the next day. At this point, I was like, "Okay, babe, those are my ideas. What would you like me to do?" And she launched into a tirade about how partners are supposed to support one another, and she just needs my emotional support because she feels like she's never going to be able to fall asleep. I tried reassuring her that she would eventually. She argued she might not. I asked if she had ever not fallen asleep at some point when she wanted to go to sleep, like not when trying to stay up all night. And she said no, so I said, "Okay, well then it seems highly unlikely that you're not going to ever fall asleep if that's never happened. So why don't you just lie here and read or watch videos until you feel sleepy and just know that it'll happen eventually. It's going to be okay. You're not in danger, and this is not the kind of sickness that requires medical attention or that you need to be scared of." She really didn't like that. And after a little bit more back and forth, I told her I was going back to bed and to please only call me or come get me if it's a real emergency, because I have to work in the morning and get our kid ready and off to school. She said, "You suck." This morning at 7, she is sleeping soundly, and I am letting her sleep in while I get our daughter ready for school and take her there on my way to work. Am I a dick for not being endlessly available to my wife in the night for emotional support because she doesn't feel well? I see now that had I had more sense about me, I was basically halfway asleep for our conversation, I would have just said, "It's going to be okay," earlier in the situation, but what else could I have done differently that would have been less shitty if you guys think it was shitty what I did do? I moved to a poor country, changed religions, and canceled my surgery for my wife that cheated on me. I was in the army, stationed in Europe, when I met a woman at a coffee shop and asked for her number. We started dating, but because she was Arab, her family didn't allow her to date. After 3 months, she proposed the idea of marriage, though we wouldn't actually get married until month 7. I agreed, and since my army contract was about to end, I left the military and planned to move to Europe for this woman. I'm American. I don't know how to explain it, but even after just 3 months, I felt as if I had known her my entire life. We talked about religion, and she told me that if this relationship were to work, I would need to convert from Christianity to Islam. I converted and began reading the Quran and watching videos to learn more about the faith. At this point, I had left the army and fully moved to Europe. When I arrived in Europe, I developed a hernia and needed surgery. I'm not sure how I got it. Probably something related to my time in the army. I remember walking out to the hospital lobby to tell her about the surgery. She tried to comfort me, but she couldn't hold back her tears, and they started rolling down her cheeks. I reassured her, saying, "I'll be okay. It's just a simple surgery." She replied that she knew but was still worried about me. At that moment, any doubts I had about her being my future wife disappeared. How could someone try so hard to hold back tears if there weren't real emotions behind them? After I left the hospital, she started researching the type of hernia I had and what she could do to help me recover. She carried all the groceries, cooked for me, and let me lean on her while we walked. From that point on, I knew I'd do anything for this woman. I even canceled the surgery to marry her first, rescheduling it afterward despite the doctor advising against it. Even though I had fully moved to Europe and was working on converting for her, there was one issue. I had to meet her grandparents in the Middle East to get their blessing. This made me uneasy because during my Army career I had heard some unsettling stories about the Middle East. Still, I told myself that if I didn't go through with this, I'd regret it for the rest of my life and always wonder about her. Somehow, I managed to get an entry visa into Iraq, which surprised me since I'm American. I met her grandparents, and they approved of me marrying their granddaughter. Afterward, I went to Germany, where the rest of her friends and family lived, and met them as well. By this point, I was learning German because her brother only spoke German, and I was also learning Arabic because her mother only spoke Arabic. We got married, and I officially converted to Islam. Shortly after, however, she had to leave for another country in Europe to take an exam for school. While she was away, I stayed in Germany and took care of her mother and her 9-year-old sister. A month later, she returned to Germany, but something seemed off. She was more distant, mean, and demanding. Eventually, I discovered through her phone that she had fallen in love with another man at her university. I confronted her, but she acted as if she hadn't seen me discover the messages. I still remember the look on her face. Her heart sank, and mine did too. Feeling overwhelmed, I returned to America to see my family and figure out what to do. While I was trying to process everything, she accused me of cheating. I attempted to talk to her about what was happening, but she demanded a divorce. I took a few days to think things over and make sure I was making the right decision. Before I could finalize anything, her mother messaged me, telling me to divorce her because she was with another man at her house in Germany. This broke my heart. Her mother had loved me like her own son and had always taken care of me. I divorced her, and we sent each other's belongings back by mail. 3 months later, she texted me about the items I had already mailed, seemingly trying to start a conversation. I responded politely, trying to help her, but ended the conversation by saying, "I don't hate you. I will cherish our time together, but this is my last message to you." She replied, "Okay." She still stalks my social media, and I admit that I miss her sometimes. But deep down, I know I can't go back to a woman who cheated on me, no matter how much I sacrificed for her. Despite everything, I have no regrets. I'm proud of myself for doing everything I could to make the relationship work, even when it seemed impossible. I got called into HR for inappropriate dancing at the company holiday party. Still annoyed. Every year, my company hosts a big formal holiday party with a best-dressed competition. This year, I decided to go for it. I've been sewing my own clothing for a few years now and occasionally do costumes for drag and burlesque shows. In working on the costumes, I've learned a lot of couture techniques in gown making. Lots of feathers and beads and sparkle in both communities. But I haven't had the chance to make myself something wearable using anything I'd learned. The holiday party felt like the right time to make myself something beautiful and show it off. I ended up making a floor-length red satin gown with a big bow in the back, matching opera gloves, and a sparkly white faux fur stole. It was significantly less glittery than initially planned, but once the base came together, I decided I liked the look of the satin undisturbed and left it alone. The dress was a big hit. It was glamorous, I felt beautiful in it, and people were shocked that I had made it myself. I won Best Dressed overall. Every time someone won, they got to go out onto the dance floor and do a little fashion walk, spin around, answer a couple questions, then go and sit down. When it was my turn to walk, I did a few things I've seen at burlesque shows, drag shows, and probably a few old Hollywood movies. I did the slow sidestep with the wavy arms. I shrugged off the stole to better show off the bow and looked down over my shoulder. I think I did a 3-step turn at some point, nothing racy or inappropriate, and less than a minute long. Anyway, someone reported it to HR. I got called in a few days after the party and told that my dancing had made people, I asked if there were multiple reports. They said there was only one, uncomfortable. They gave me the "work parties are still work" speech and let me go. They didn't even really give me a chance to say anything. I'm so frustrated. The dress was work party appropriate, my walk was work party appropriate, and no one has said a single negative thing to my face. I'm still proud of myself in the dress, but it feels like majorly misplaced effort. What a cruddy way to start the break and end the work year. First is that the moves I added to my walk are not specific to burlesque, and can be found in virtually all forms of dance. I only mentioned burlesque and drag because that's where I learned about them. I'm not a dancer and never have been, and their functions on a stage. The sideways walk is used a lot in burlesque and drag because it's a really, really good way to show an audience your outfit without just doing a regular catwalk around the stage. Moving sideways keeps your torso, so the front of the outfit, facing the audience, and arms up out on the hips keeps the outfit in full view. There are variations of this seen in things like musicals, ballroom dance, when couples are entering the floor, and the wavy arms are, I think, inspired by ballet. Depending on how you move, it can be really graceful, very sexy, or kind of camp, like purse first. I was trying to be graceful, show off the dress, and make the glitter on the stole sparkle a little, hence the arm waving. Second, almost everyone who walks each year does their best impression or a really campy imitation of a fashion model's catwalk. Some people really swing their hips, and most people stop at the end of the runway and do the model hip hop and over-the-shoulder look into the camera. Last year, the guy who won Best Dress showed up in a gold sequin suit and did a genuine ballroom, Paris's burning ballroom, not waltz ballroom, catwalk that would have been very scandalous if a woman had done it. There's also time for actual dancing towards the end of the night, and there are definitely people every year who get a little loose. I think somebody did get called in for drunk twerking last year, but she was kind of a mess that whole month, so it might have been something else. I do understand that maybe my attempt at being graceful may have come off sexier than intended. I was banking on the fact that the moves are not burlesque or drag specific, the gown itself is not form-fitting, it's a full skirt, and felt that others swaying their hips down the runway was less work-appropriate than ballerina arms. Maybe I was wrong, maybe I was right. The comments seem split. But I'll come up with something else if I get to walk again next year. This small event has me shook to the core. I didn't know where else to post this, but I had to get some of this off my chest. On Saturday at work, I had a very strange experience that has me really shaken up and left me in a scary mental state. Out of nowhere, I glanced in front of me and a small, skinny, very defined rope of what looked like dense white smoke moved like a snake down from the ceiling, over to me, moved around in front of my face, and then continued slithering past me through the air. This mysterious white smoke looked similar to the trail left in the air when incense is burning. It touched me, went through my underarm, and then continued on. It had defined edges and moved extremely similar to how a snake would. I stopped working and stared for a moment and took stock of my surroundings. There was absolutely nothing in the building that could have produced this smoke. Its movement was beyond peculiar. Truthfully, it didn't even really look like smoke, so much as a thick white mist, roughly the size, thickness, and length of an average snake. A bit shaken, I asked if anyone else had seen that. Nobody moved, nobody saw anything. They looked at me. Out of nowhere, and with no premeditation, I randomly blurted out, "Is this a simulation?" I don't know why I said it. I didn't think to say it. It's not something I would say. The words just appeared in my lips. I didn't think of them, they just happened. I don't know why on earth I said this. Upon saying this, the roughly 5 other people in the room turned their heads to me, expressionless. Again, words formed at my lips, this time louder. "Is this a simulation?" I don't know why I said it. It's like something was speaking through me. Nobody said a word. I asked again, getting angry this time. I said, "I need you to tell me if this is or is not a simulation." Nobody said a word. Several faces looked at me, widened their eyes a bit, and went back to work. I don't believe in ghosts or the supernatural. I don't believe in any religion. I don't subscribe to conspiracy theories. I'm not one of those. But this event has left me depressed and borderline suicidal. I don't know why it shook me so much. Did I experience a mental break? Did something snap in my brain? Nothing has felt the same since this occurrence. I feel like I'm going insane. Am I the asshole for not explicitly stating my punch is non-alcoholic? I recently attended a potluck-style work party and brought punch, which has since caused a problem between myself and another coworker, who we'll call Sandy. Last week, my boss hosted a party at his house to celebrate the end of the busy season and a job well done. All of my coworkers and their spouses were invited, and we decided it would work well to do a potluck to offset the cost of feeding everyone, about 35 people, since not everyone who came brought a spouse or significant other. I volunteered to make a punch that I've brought to previous work events that everyone said they enjoyed, as well as some fruit to go with it. This was a casual party with alcohol present, but since I have some coworkers who don't drink, I didn't add any alcohol to this punch and figured that if people really wanted some, they'd just add it themselves. Fast forward a couple hours, and Sandy is getting even louder and more dramatic than normal and is stumbling around the party. I didn't think much of it and figured she brought her own drinks or was adding some of the host's alcohol that was put out into something else. She suddenly fell off the chair she was sitting on and made a big show of saying that it's because she was so drunk. She then asked me in front of the rest of our coworkers what it was that I put in the punch. I was confused and told her what was in it, just a mix of ginger ale, 7-Up, orange juice, and a can of juice concentrate. And she wanted to know what alcohol I put in it because she's been drinking it all night and is really feeling it. I told her that I didn't put any alcohol in it and asked if maybe someone else had spiked the punch bowl. Nobody said they added anything, and one of my coworkers who doesn't drink even said that they'd also been drinking the punch all evening and was still completely sober. I also would like to clarify that I understand how context can matter, like if everyone else was really drunk, then that can make even a sober person feel like they're loaded, but that definitely was not the vibe. Sandy was the only person acting drunk. She then got really quiet and went by herself to the bathroom. The rest of my coworkers and I exchanged some awkward glances and tried to laugh it off. She left shortly after, and I received an angry text from her about how I shouldn't have embarrassed her like that, and that now she looks like an idiot in front of our bosses and the rest of our coworkers. She's been hostile to me at work ever since, and is basically refusing to talk to me. I didn't think I did anything wrong, and most of my coworkers agree with me, but some say that I should have just let her go on thinking that the punch was the alcoholic to save her the embarrassment, and I'm wondering now if I'm in the wrong. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole from stepping back from helping with my nieces? I live with my sister in our parents' home. Parents only visit in the summer, live elsewhere half of the year. I live rent-free at the moment, and she pays for mortgage, and I work for her company, and I've always helped out with my nieces since I graduated last summer, especially since their dad does very little around the house. He treats my sister poorly, accuses her of cheating, and plays favorites with their kids, but she struggles to leave him. My therapist pointed out that by constantly stepping in to help, I'm enabling the situation, so I've decided to set boundaries and stop handling responsibilities he should be taking care of. I feel guilty about stepping back, but I don't want to keep contributing to the chaos. The other day, my sister texted my mom and I saying, "After talking with Bill, we have decided he is going to start looking for a place to live. We are not telling anyone yet, but I am telling you both because I want to be strong and stick to my decision and not feel like I didn't do my best. I don't need phone calls to talk about it today because it could make me cry. Love you both." I didn't ask much since she set a boundary around discussing it, but today she shared that he'll be moving into their rental property. For her own well-being, she feels better knowing her kids will be going somewhere she's familiar with when they stay with him. He's supposed to move out within 60 days because they have month-to-month renters on that property and are going to give them time to move. I've continued stepping back from being as readily available for my sister, and it's been really hard. I feel like my family has always provided for me, so I should always be there to help. To clarify, I'm not just at home cleaning all day and working and then picking up my nieces. I have my own life, I go out whenever I'm off work, and I have side hobbies, writing, crafts, calisthenics. I also am starting up a business, and I'm also saving up to move out myself. That part is scary for me because I fear financial failure, but I'm working through it with my therapist. As of now, my nieces don't know, and I'm not sure when my sister plans to tell them. A part of me still feels like he won't actually leave, and another part struggles with keeping my boundary, but I'm staying firm, and so far I've been doing well with it. My mom did agree that this boundary is necessary because my sister does need to realize I will not be living here forever. Wife just passed away and can't stop crying. My wife is the love of my life. We met each other at the right time of our lives. She was 25 and I was 27. We just fit and clicked. We got married 4 years after that, and 3 years later had our daughter, who is now 12. Lots of terrible things happened after that. She suffered a miscarriage 2 years after giving birth to our daughter. Then 2 years after that, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She fought her illness for 8 years and just passed away on the 2nd of January. I've been broken ever since. I'm trying my best to pick up the pieces. I'm suffering from depression and anxiety. So to counter that, I've been going to the gym every day. If I don't do that, I get more prone to anxiety attacks. People have noticed how much weight I've lost and how jacked I've become. I've never really noticed because those are byproducts. My goal is just to survive each day. And because of my sweat, nobody notices my tears. I do my best to take care of my daughter, but it's not enough because I can barely take care of myself. I can't bring myself to cook healthy meals because I often associate that with my wife, as I prepared healthy meals for her. The moment I pick up a knife, my hands shake, so I know I'm not okay. I've already seen my therapist, and I have another session at the end of the month. He's a really good therapist counselor, as he was able to help me through my initial grief and depression when my wife was still alive. But for some reason, he wasn't at all helpful during the last session. I've been asking people, family, relatives, and friends for help, but they all keep saying the same thing: be strong for your daughter. I know my responsibilities. That's why I'm asking for help, so that I can take better care of her, because she's the last part of my wife left in this world. But I can't seem to move on. I'm still too attached to my wife. All of our memories together are just so vivid in my mind. She's still so very much alive in me, but knowing that she's not with me physically is the thing that causes me constant pain and grief. That's why I can't stop crying. My wife's friend suggested that I see a psychiatrist so that I can be prescribed medication that will deal with my depression. But I'm a bit wary because of several things. First, I don't want to be reliant on the medication. And second, whatever I'm feeling is because of the love I have for my wife, and I don't want to numb that. I know that this is a process, that I have to go through it, but it's just so difficult right now, and I don't know what to do. The world and society isn't kind to a grieving husband who loves his wife. Every night I always whisper to my wife, "Please take me now. I can't live like this. I can't live without you." And I repeatedly say that until I fall asleep. And when I wake up, the cycle begins again. I can't see a light at the end of this tunnel. And people also tell me to be open to meeting someone again. I hate that. They don't get that my wife is the only one I want in this life and the next. Conservatives of Reddit, how do you feel about the shift in your party from supporting Ukraine to supporting Russia? Here is some information that may put things in context. In 1994, the Soviet Union had fallen, leaving nuclear weapons in the hands of fragile, corrupt, and possibly hostile successor states. 3,200 warheads were left behind in Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Belarus, many atop ICBMs that could launch and hit anywhere in the world. There was not much concern about the ones in Kazakhstan or Belarus, as neither country had the technical know-how to maintain or launch them. Treaties with Russia quickly drew those nukes back within Russian territorial boundaries. Ukraine was a very different story. Ukraine was a technological and manufacturing powerhouse from the former USSR, and had both manufactured most of those nukes and missiles, but also was the primary source of trained personnel to maintain them and build new ones. In fact, Russia actually had to conclude a later treaty with Ukraine to provide skilled labor to maintain those nukes that Russia had. But that is another story, knowing Ukraine had the know-how and capability to possess nukes, but also knowing Ukraine at the time was hopelessly corrupt and did not want to spend money on those nukes. The US, UK, Russia, and Ukraine entered into nuclear non-proliferation talks with the goal of denuclearizing Ukraine. Those talks succeeded and became UN Treaty Registration, number 52,241, colloquially known as the Budapest Memorandum. In agreement to return the nukes to Russia, the US, and Great Britain gave vague security assurances which boiled down to two concrete treaty responsibilities. First, none of the signatories would invade Ukraine. and in the event of invasion, the signatories would be required to meet and determine a course of action to support Ukraine's sovereignty. Fast forward, and in the mid-2010s, Russia both invaded Ukraine, starting an 11-year period of hostility and violence, mostly through proxies but exploding to the full-scale war we know today. UK and US met, as per our treaty obligations, and determined to support Ukraine through arms, training, and humanitarian aid. In addition to our treaty responsibilities, the U.S., under Joe Biden, also convinced many of our European allies to support Ukraine in a similar manner. This was due to intelligence that indicated Russia was planning additional quick invasions, with Moldova scheduled to be invaded the first week of March 2022. It was a lot easier to perform our responsibilities because a popular movement in Ukraine had existed for years combating corruption, leading up to the creation of an immensely popular Ukrainian TV show, Servant of the People, where a high school teacher became president and cleaned up the corrupt government. This series so resonated with the reform-minded psyche of the Ukrainian people that the star of that show, Volodymyr Zelensky, an accomplished actor, was drafted into politics and, in a stunning upset, actually elected president on a reform platform very similar to what his TV character championed. Certainly an example of life-following art. But it boiled down to the fact that a pro-democracy, anti-corruption government in Ukraine made performing our treaty obligations an easier pill to swallow. In 2025, the U.S. had repudiated our treaty obligations and are refusing to continue to support Ukraine, as agreed in our required meet and confer. Now, this is a good deal of history, and we approach our real point. Ukraine is, to date, the only country in the world that has given up nuclear weapons in exchange for security guarantees. It is also the only country in the world to be invaded by one of those guarantors, and also the only country in the world to have another one of those guarantors refuse to abide by their trade responsibilities. Other countries are watching this and weighing the value of developing nukes and retaining them versus the value of negotiating away their nuclear armament, and they overwhelmingly see that giving up nukes results in existential threats to their sovereignty and existence as a culture, and that the most powerful countries in the world are either doing the invasion or standing by while it happens. The conclusion is that if Ukraine falls, there will be significant increased nuclear proliferation as a result. No one will ever again give up so much as a single nuke, and if nukes proliferate, they will eventually be used. This boils down to one idea. If we do not support Ukraine, eventually millions of people, possibly people you know and love, will die in nuclear fire. But we can prevent that right now by demanding U.S. leaders abide by Agreement 52,241. Am I the asshole for telling a woman her child is welcome in my home but she isn't because of her criminal record? My husband and I have a 5-year-old son who just started kindergarten this past fall. He has met a boy named Sam, who he has decided is his best friend. My son has had a lot of playdates in the past because we tried hard to socialize him well from a young age. He has been asking if his friend Sam can come over for a playdate. Sure, no problem. I wrote a note with my name and number for Sam to give to his mom. I get a Facebook friend request from Sam's mom, who appears to be a methany. I work in healthcare and recognize the sores on her face from picking. It's pretty obvious from her Facebook that she's on some kind of drugs and maybe has mental health issues. Out of curiosity, I looked up her name in our county's jail view record, and yup, long history. Drug possession, fraud, prostitution, theft, battery, obstruction of justice. It's not great. Anyways, I didn't want to let who his mom is get in the way of our kids playing together, but there was no way in hell I'd let my son go over to their house for a playdate despite her offering. I played it off as me being overprotective and him being my only child, to not offend her. She laughed and said if you have more, you'll learn to be less overprotective. She has 5 kids, but agreed to a playdate at my house. The park was also an option, but she said my house was fine. The weather is very cold here right now, so indoors over the park makes sense. Sunday comes over, I let the boy in. I mentioned she could come back in a few hours to pick him up. Whenever works for her, and I'd be sure to feed them both lunch. I asked if he has any food allergies. She says no, but she insisted on staying. I tried to make up a silly excuse, said I had a headache and would watch the boys diligently, but that I'm not really in the mood to hang out. She insisted that it would be great for us to get to know each other. Since the boys were out of earshot, already in the playroom, I stepped outside and quietly told her that I had looked up her criminal record, and I just don't feel comfortable having someone in my home with theft charges and an obvious drug problem. I said if that's a problem, we could just meet at the park from then on, but the boys get along, so I hope it's not a problem. I admit I was maybe a bit harsh and to the point. She kind of yelled at me and said, I think that I'm better than her, which maybe I do, and that I don't know anything. She stormed off, her son still in the house. I checked with the kids to make sure they didn't hear anything. When she came back, she just honked her horn and refused to come to the door. My husband kind of thinks I'm an asshole. He's always been very gentle and kind. He thinks I should have just watched her like a hawk. I told him I don't want to forcefully subject myself to that kind of person, and I shouldn't have to be on guard about some crackhead stealing our stuff. Am I the asshole? My friend refused to let me use his bathroom. Nonfiction. My friend Mary is a single mom of a 5- and 8-year-old. Mary also has a brother named Marcus, and Marcus is married with 4 kids of his own. Although I live within 5 minutes of Mary, Marcus actually lives about 45 minutes from us. Last night around 7 p.m., Mary calls me with an emergency. She says she's working late and was wondering if I can go pick up her kids at Marcus' house. She claims that one of her kids did something bad and now they're being asked to be picked up and to go home. Mary says she will be home by the time I pick them up and will send me gas money, so I agree to help out and start driving out there. About 2 miles from Marcus' house, and Mary texts me. Come back home. Everything is fine now. Mary texts. But I'm right by their house. I reply. I'm sorry, but I guess they sorted everything out and they're spending the night now. I'm annoyed, but I also need to use the bathroom pretty badly, Seno too, unfortunately, and figured I can at least stop by Marcus' house and use his. I'm a family friend who's been to his house plenty of times, so I figured it's not a big deal. I pull up to his house and ring the doorbell. No answer. I ring the doorbell again and again, no answer. I can hear them watching a movie in the living room, so I know they're home. I ring the doorbell again, and now I get a text. Marcus says he's not answering the door. I said to come back home. Mary texts. I ignore the text and ring the doorbell again. Marcus' wife finally answers. Hey, Kim, sorry to bother you guys. I heard there was an issue with the kids, but it's been resolved. But I was wondering before I drive back home if I could use your bathroom, I ask. Before Kim can answer, Marcus spots me and gets up from his chair. Dude, what are you doing here? I told Mary to tell you that you didn't need to show up, Marcus says. Well, she didn't tell me until I was down the street. I was just hoping I could use the bathroom before I make the drive back home, I say again. No, dude. Know and respect some boundaries. Can't you see we're watching a movie and having family time? Marcus asks. Oh yeah, I'm sorry to bother your guys' movie, but I'll be real quick if that's okay, I say, trying to be funny. No, dude, seriously, learn some boundaries. I said no, so go home, Marcus says. Wait, are you serious? Yeah, I'm dead serious. You're interrupting our family time. But I really need to use the bathroom. Dude, there's a Walmart down the block. Use their bathroom. I apologize for bothering them and leave. I do stop at the Walmart to relieve myself and head home. I later ask Mary why Marcus was so hostile, as he's never acted this way, and why using his bathroom was such a big violation of his boundaries. Mary says she doesn't know, but says to just forget it. I find this hard to forget. I did drive 1.5 hours out of my way only to waste that time and denied a reasonable request to use the bathroom of a family friend. At least Mary still sent me $30 for gas. I quit my marriage, and my husband acts like nothing changed. I quit my marriage after years of financial strain and broken promises from my husband. I've been intentionally distancing myself, physically and financially, for the past year, and he has little to say about it, as long as we still look married. The last few years of my 13-year marriage have been tense. After spending the first decade feeling like a mother roommate to my husband more than a partner, I was done. I made it known that if he did not turn things around, We would not have a future together. He spent a week at his friend's before coming back home, and I hoped it was the wake-up call he needed. He never told anyone about the falling out. He promised me that he would change, he would stop draining the bank account, he would stop forcing us deeper into debt, he would listen to me when I explicitly told him what I need, he would follow through with action instead of broken promises. We went through another year of bullshit. He maxed out my credit card while he was unemployed, and just 6 weeks after I had paid it off. His follow-through was non-existent, and he was becoming hostile when I would bring anything up. He would do the things for me that made him feel like a good husband while ignoring the things I needed him to do as a partner. We made more than enough money to live comfortably, yet every month we were sinking deeper into debt. I agonized over different debt repayment and budgeting strategies, trying to choose the one I thought would be the easiest for him to follow. I blame myself. I demanded we split everything 50-50 from now on so that he would know he is accountable for his share instead of forcing me to pay 100% of everything when he runs out of money, despite him making 40% more than me every month. I had a future I needed to plan for. I had family across the country and a terminally ill father I wanted to see, who has since passed. We had 2 kids who we needed to be able to support. I was trying to maintain a decent credit score. When I verbalized all of this, he responded with all the things I needed to hear. He told me he understood and would do better. He didn't. After a couple of weeks, he acted like nothing happened and went right back to his destructive habits. I decided to rent my own apartment, and when I moved out, I felt such immense relief. My husband stayed involved, committed to continuing to work things out. After a month, I was convinced that we still had something to fight for, and like an idiot, I moved back in. Again, he never told anyone about the falling out. He promised we would continue with weekly check-ins and he would communicate better while watching his spending more closely. However, things soon reverted back to the way they were and would always be, deeper in debt with a plummeting credit score. Since then, we've had a number of very honest, heated discussions that were mostly about money. At one point, I accused him of being more satisfied with the image of a successful marriage than actually having one. He insists that I'm his best friend. Everything he does is done for us, our future, and he's nothing without me. Finally, in September, after yet another month in overdraft, I demanded he get his own bank account for spending so we can continue to use the shared one for splitting the bills, instead of him overdrawing it every 2 weeks. Then reminded him twice after that, but the lines were too long. Instead, I went through the agonizing process of having everything moved over to my own separate bank account in December, and now I pay for everything with my own income and benefits, excluding his car payment and insurance. That was my final breaking point. I moved out of the bedroom and cemented our roles in my brain, co-parenting roommates. Since the total separation of finances, I've paid my credit cards down by 50%, built up a small savings, and have been able to buy myself things that I want, like skincare, hobby supplies, and new clothes, for the first time in over a decade without having to worry about being short on our mortgage. I feel like I'm finally free from being held financially hostage for way too long. This still wasn't the wake-up call I needed it to be. Over the past 2 months, he continues to leave me hanging at the grocery store, out of money and unable to help pay to feed his kids, despite the fact that he only has a car and insurance payment to make now. We sleep separately every night. He has never offered to discuss the status of our relationship, and I don't care enough to talk about it at this point. I have nothing new to say, and I am not repeating myself. I've given up and have started the process of building up enough resources to leave and start a new life once the kids graduate in 4 years, but hopefully sooner. Despite this, he is still expecting me to attend trips to see his family as if nothing has changed, and I will for our kids. He is still focused on the appearance of a healthy marriage while we operate as roommates, and seems perfectly content as long as I am living within the same 4 walls as he is.